All right, this unit's all about intelligence. What is intelligence? Can we really identify what it is? Is it a simple thing, or is it a little more complicated than we think? As a great athlete, are they considered intelligent, or a great musician, or just somebody who does really well in school? Are you intelligent, and how do we measure it? What makes people intelligent? All questions we'll explore in this unit. Coming up right now, looking at intelligence. Here we go. Okay, so first of all, we have to define what intelligence is. And it may not be as easy as you think, but have a look at the outcomes here, and we'll look at some of the theories that are involved as well. First of all, intelligent is basically using our abilities and what we learn to adapt to our environment, and basically to make our situation better by the knowledge that we've gained in the past. We often will measure it with a test of intelligence. Now keep in mind, an intelligence test is a score on a test. It is not intelligence, but it's supposed to measure it. So let's look at our first theory. Look at Spearman. Spearman thought there must be a general intelligence, because when they tested people's intelligence, he would look at, through factor analysis, we can see that if you're good in one cluster, you're probably good in the other cluster. This would be like if you're good at math, you're probably good at science, you're probably good at a lot of your subjects. So he thought there must be some kind of underlying general intelligence, and he marks it when you see the small letter G, that's what it stands for. Okay, if we compare this to athleticism, you can find, athletes are good at lots of sports. However, when we look at perhaps a power lifter, they may not be good at, say, ice dancing, okay, or something along those lines. So it doesn't always carry over into another thing. So therefore, we may have a situation where we have more than one intelligence. Okay, Howard Gardner is one of the leading experts in this, and he's come up with 8 intelligences. He says there's more, but he's narrowed it down to these ones that he's pretty sure exist. So linguistic, logical, mathematical, musical, spatial, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal, and naturalistic. So linguistic people with high linguistic intelligence would be speakers, writers, all those kinds of things that use linguistic knowledge. Logical, mathematical, what do they call them? Accountants, people that work with numbers. Musical, obviously, great composers, musicians, and so on. Spatial, these are people that know where things go in a location. They can see things and manipulate them in their mind as far as that goes. So painters and people maybe that work with small circuit boards. Bodily kinesthetic, body movement, dancers, and so athletes. Intrapersonal, these are people that are well aware, they have an intelligence about themselves. Interpersonal, intelligence about others and how to interact with them. Okay, so all of these are Gardner's 8 intelligences. One of the things that the intelligences don't seem to make as big a difference on is we look at how successful are people. You can be high of intelligence, yet you can have problems with success later on. A lot of the reasons are because people procrastinate, people aren't motivated, all of those kinds of things that stop people from getting to where they want to be. Okay, get rid of that. Okay, so one of the things in psychology is grit. And grit is having a goal and putting your efforts, undivided into that. And that usually leads to success, just the same as it would in your courses. Your idea of success in psychology AP probably has more to do with your determination and how much you enjoy the subject and are motivated to do well, rather than how intelligent you are. Now, Sternberg has another one. He thinks it's not one intelligence, but he's narrowed it down to 3, where he says it's analytical, which is your academic type of problem solving, creative intelligence, and practical intelligence. Practical, knowing when and where to use it and in what situations. Here's a quick summary of the theories, and we will probably copy that out for you in class. Another thing we have is emotional intelligence. When we look at, we talk about it, it's how we perceive emotions, how we understand emotions and manage our emotions and use it for adaptive or creative thinking. So we found people that are high on the emotional intelligence level often become successful people. They remain mentally healthy often because they are able to manage their emotions and, stave off things like depression and anxiety. And So this is an aspect of intelligence too that a lot of our tests don't measure. When we look at the biology of it, does brain size make a difference? And when we've studied brain sizes, and often we use like MRI studies right now, and we look at, we would think, a bigger brain, maybe the bigger the smarts. Okay, but what we have found is there is a correlation between brain size and intelligence when we control for the body type. And it's only about zero point 0.3, which is a small correlation. However, it is significant. Okay, why is this? It could be people are born this way. It could be that it's because they've created more connections, neural networks in those areas that they're really good at. Neuroplasticity would be in that case. When we look at the gray matter versus the white matter, the gray matter again is where the neurons and the axons live. There was a researcher in Canada that got a hold of Einstein's brain, and we'll give you the history of Einstein's brain after he died in class, but she studied it and she found that the brain was about the same size as other people's. However, the parietal lobes and part of the frontal lobes were a bit different. Now, the parietal lobes, and this would explain why he is so good at logical problems, logical problem solving, because that's where it lives in your brain. But is that because he was born with larger parietal lobes, or was it because he thought so much about those things that he created more webs to create the thicker cortex? Another thing is how quick can we, our perceptual speed, how quick can we notice things? Does that lead to intelligence? In this little test, we look at, there's a stimulus flash, the one on the left, and a mask goes over top of it, and you're supposed to say which was the long side. And in this research, we found those people that could actually perceive this a lot quicker scored higher on intelligence scores, so there does seem to be some relationship to perceptual speed. Now we'll look at, how do we test intelligence? We'll look at quickly at the history of that and how we do it now. So it started with Francis Galton, who is actually, he is the cousin of Charles Darwin. So he believed a lot in Darwin's theories with the survival of the fittest and natural selection. And he narrowed it down to these 4 things. He said it could be reaction time, sensory acuity, muscular power, and body proportions. Now this doesn't sound an awful lot like what we consider to be intelligence. He believed it was along the line of hereditary genius, kind of based on Darwin's ideas, that if we could identify those that are superior in these ranges, then we could promote the mating of them and create a more intelligent species or a better species. Okay, so moving on from that, the first one that was used in schools was done in France by a guy named Alfred Binet. He developed a test, and his goal was to identify children going into the French school system that may need extra help. Okay, and the way he did it was by testing mental age. So he would give them the test, the questions, and then it would be compared against other students. So if you were a 5-year-old and you scored like an average 5-year-old, you had a mental age of 5. If you were a 5-year-old and you scored like an average 8-year-old, you had a mental age of 8. Okay, and your chronological age, which we'll show you in the formula that's used to develop IQ, is your actual age. So this came to the States by way of Lewis Terman, and they used it at Stanford University as an entrance requirement test. And it became known as the Stanford-Binet test. Okay, so what he did to change it, though, is he gave new age norms because it was for older people, and he added a superior end since he was looking at the university entrance. So it changed somewhat, but it was based on Binet's ideas to begin with. So what it comes up with, your IQ stands for intelligence quotient, a quotient being the answer to a division problem. So this is how it was calculated then. We have a mental age divided by chronological age times 100. So if you're 5 years old and you have a mental age of 5, then you would have an IQ of 100. If you're 8 and had a mental age of 8, you'd have an IQ of 100. So 100 is considered average. Okay, this works really well up to a point, but if you consider if somebody has a mental age of 25 and a chronological age of 80, they have an incredibly low IQ, yet that's quite good. So it works more for the younger children, the intelligence quotient in this way. In World War One, they did this test was used in a different way. In World War One, they tested people coming into the United States. The U.S. government did, so it was immigrants and refugees and so on. And what they found is those people coming in from certain locations scored lower on the IQ test. Now we know today, and you would thought they would have known, that there is cultural bias in the test, and that's why they would score lower. Plus, there are language barriers as well. Okay, and we'll talk a lot more about the problems with cultural bias in tests. So the modern tests, we look at achievement tests, which measure what you know, what you've accomplished. So for example, your AP exam at the end of this course is an achievement test. How much did you achieve during the course? Aptitude tests are designed to measure how well you will do at something. So when you take a career aptitude test, it will suggest careers that you may have the ability to perform well in. And some will say that the aptitude tests are really just disguised IQ tests. And in fact, when we look at the correlation between IQ and SAT scores, which is an aptitude test for U.S. universities, we see that there is a correlation between the two. The most common test we use now, one of the most accepted, is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, or the WAIS. Okay, he also has a version for children called the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children, or the WISC. School psychologists in our district, when they test students, young students, they will be using the WISC test. So what it comprises of is you end up with 3 scores. You end up with a verbal IQ, a performance IQ, and an overall IQ. Okay, so the verbal component contains things like general information, recognizing similarities, vocabulary, comprehension, how well you understand things, digit span, which is a test we did in the memory unit to see how many things you can hold in your short-term memory, which is 7 plus or minus 2 on average, if you remember. Hope you remember. And you would also do the digit span backwards. The performance section would be like they show you a picture for completion and you have to say what's missing. You could have a series of tiles that you have to arrange into a story for picture arrangement. Block design is you have some blocks with little like tangram things on them, and you have to copy them and they see how fast you can do it. Object assembly, how fast can you put together an object like this dog. Digit symbol substitution, they basically give you a code and then you have to decode something using that code. Okay, so those are the things. And what we might find with this, say we're using it for students. Say a student's having difficulty in school, they're in grade 4, grade 5. We give them this test and we may find, for example, their verbal score is at 116, which is superior, but their performance score is around 75 or even lower, which says to us that that child is learning, but they can't show you that they're learning. So it gives us some insight into how we can help students when we use the score for this purpose. Now, all modern IQ tests are standardized to 100. So standardized means that we follow the same rules for the same amount of time for questions and all of that. And it's also standardized or normed to 100, meaning that the average score for that age is going to be 100. And then we look at the standard deviation, which was 15. If you remember back in the research unit, this is the same thing that we showed. Everything in nature, or if we're measuring IQ, we're measuring height, we're measuring weight, it's going to form close to a normal bell curve, symmetrical curve. And again, remember these numbers. So remember, like in one standard deviation, so from 85 to 115, which is one standard deviation either side of 100, there are 68% of the people, and that is considered to be an average IQ. Below 85 to 70 would be inferior IQ or inferior intelligence. 115 to 130 would be superior. And then on the extremes, on the outside, we got the top 2% of the population scoring 130 and above. And at the lower end, we have about 2% scoring 70 and below, which we would say is getting into the intellectual dysfunction. One of the things that's been happening over time, as we've noticed, which is a significant effect, is called the Flynn effect. And it's average intelligence scores have been rising. Okay, so back in 1920, somebody with an average IQ would only score about 76 on the 1990 version. And this effect seems to be continuing. We don't really know why. It could be more nutrition, better education, it could be the mix of genes that we have going on, which improves our intelligence. We don't really know, but yet we do know that this effect is something that is occurring. So to be a good test, it has to be reliable. Reliability means that the scores correlate. Okay, so if we have a test retest, then your original score on the test that you do one day, and then you may do another version of that test on another day later on, and those scores should be fairly similar. Okay, that would mean it is reliable. If they are quite different, it is not reliable. The other ways we can do it, we can look at split half reliability. We can take half the test, take a score for that half and a score for another half of the test, and see if they are similar or very close, and that would show high reliability. A good intelligence test should be reliable, meaning it doesn't matter what day you take it or what mood you're in or whatever it is, the score will be the same. The other thing is validity. Validity does it measure what it's supposed to. So content validity would be based on, do the parts of the test match what it's trying to measure. So in an AP psychology exam, it has to follow the criterion that the questions have to do with psychology. It would be very silly if you had to take a driver's test and they included psychology questions. Okay, so that would not be valid. Predictive validity is what it sounds like. If you have higher intelligence, you should do better in university. Okay, and so does that correlate? Okay, the SAT, which is an achievement test in the States, we find doesn't correlate real well to how successful students are, yet is still used as a test. And we may have an explanation for that in this next slide here. If you can see, we're going to use this as an example, but this could be intelligence and getting into university. Football lineman success to body weight in pounds. So this scatter plot shows there's quite a correlation. However, if we look at the 250-pound range and over, just in this pink area, there's not very much correlation. So it really doesn't have much to do with your success over 250 pounds. But beforehand, it does seem to correlate. So this could be the same thing with an SAT score. After a certain number, it depends on grit, okay, which is your determination and your motivation to do well. Okay, so that's the first part of our intelligence unit. We'll be right back with the second video real quick. We'll see you guys in class. Bye for now.